John Bolton was former President Trump's national security advisor and previously served as U.S. ambassador to the United Nations. And he joins us now. Ambassador, good morning. Thanks for being with us.
Thank you for having me.
A lot to talk about, but let's start with Cuba. You've said the U.S. should show strong support for the Cuban people. Do you believe the president should be advocating for regime change there? Do you see this as a national security threat?
Yes, I do. Look, ever since the Cold War, Russia has had a significant interest in what happens in Cuba. They've used Cuban surrogates in places like Venezuela to ensure the Chavez-Maduro dictatorship there. I've talked about the troika of tyranny in the Western Hemisphere, Cuba, Venezuela, and Nicaragua. I think these demonstrations in Cuba, which experts say go back to the early 1960s in terms of the size and the spread all across the island. I think this shows real dissatisfaction, not with temporary circumstances, but with the regime itself. And I think we've got lots of Cuban Americans who can have a lot of suggestions about how to put pressure on this regime and let the Cuban people have their freedom back.
Ambassador, I also want to ask you about Afghanistan because the Biden administration is pulling troops out. By the end of August, we're going to be leaving Afghanistan. You've said that that's a mistake across the board. That war has cost, by some estimates, in excess of $2 trillion. Is the price of leaving going to be even higher than that, do you think?
Well, I think that's the risk. Look, not all of that money was spent on actual military hostilities. And the reason we went into Afghanistan was very clear, because we were attacked on September the 11th. The reason we've stayed in Afghanistan for 20 years is not out of charity. It's not to make Afghanistan a nicer place. It's not even principally to defend the government of Afghanistan. It's to defend American civilians against another terrorist attack. Now, when we withdraw, and NATO along with us, people are pretty confident that the Taliban are going to take back over all or nearly all of Afghanistan. And there's a high likelihood that al-Qaeda and ISIS will once again take sanctuary there and threaten us with terrorist attacks. That's the cost we should be looking at, not looking at what it is today, but what we have prevented by our sustained presence there.
You think we accelerate the risk of another 9/11?
I think that's the prospect. If the Taliban take back over, and I don't know any serious observer who doesn't think they will, they've maintained their ties with al-Qaeda. ISIS and other terrorist groups we haven't even heard of yet will take advantage of the isolation of Afghanistan and set up bases there. We're there as an insurance policy to protect America. This is not a charity project for Afghanistan. The opponents of our being there have treated it as if we're trying to make Afghanistan into the Switzerland of Central Asia. That's not the purpose. The purpose is to protect America there rather than to have to protect it in the streets and over the skies here.
You mentioned the Russian influence in Cuba. I want to ask you about the Biden administration's approach towards Russia. His predecessor, who you worked for, you said in an interview last year that you believe Vladimir Putin thinks he can play President Trump like a fiddle. Do you think Mr. Biden has had a better approach?
Well, I think they're still getting warmed up, but we have had a summit between Biden and Putin. Biden supposedly told Putin to cut out the cyber attacks. That was followed by a significant ransomware attack. We don't know whether Biden has taken retaliatory measures. I certainly hope he has in cyberspace. But I think our policy on Russia is still very ill-defined, and Cuba is not a place to give the Russians a break.
What do you think the president should be doing with Mr. Putin, particularly on cybersecurity?
Well, I think he should be beefing up American offensive cyber capabilities to create structures of deterrence against what the Russians are doing. Putin has played a weak hand very well. This is a form of asymmetric or hybrid warfare that they wage against the United States. We need to do a lot more just with respect to Russia, but with respect to China, Iran, and others who are engaging us, and we're not adequately prepared.
Former President Trump, your former boss, won the straw poll at the CPAC conference. I think he got 70% of the vote. The only person who was even close to that was Ron DeSantis with 21%. Would you vote for President Trump in the next election or for Governor DeSantis?
Well, I don't think President Trump's going to run for re-election in 2024. He may talk about it incessantly before then. But I've had 2 polls that my super PAC has done already, one national poll, one in New Hampshire, that shows Trump's support among his base within the Republican Party slipping, which I don't think is receiving adequate coverage. And I've got a poll coming out in the next few days that will show continuing splits and problems within Trump's base. I think Trump's support is exaggerated, and I think people are making a mistake if they think it's going to remain durable.
So if he were the nominee, though, would you support him?
No, and I didn't support him in 2020. I don't think he's fit to be president. It would be a disaster for the Republican Party to nominate him. He would lose overwhelmingly. He has very, very little support among independents, and he could take down an awful lot of Republican candidates for the Senate, the House, and state and local elections.
Ambassador Bolton, thank you very much for being with us this morning. We do appreciate it.
Yes, we do, Ambassador. I guess you and the president won't be going to lunch anytime soon, Ambassador Bolton.
No credit card.
All right. Thank you, sir. Good to see you.